Hey, everybody, this is Simon Black. Hope you have a great day wherever you are in the world. I'm here with one of my dearest friends here. This is Jess Hatcher. If you've been to any of our live events, you've heard from Jess before. He's a great guy, very good friend. Among many other things, besides being a Renaissance man in his own right, world traveler, Jess is also a former American. And we just spent the last couple of days together in the most beautiful place in Sardinia, way up in the mountains. God, how many you drove? So we went through like 150 hairpin turns to get up that mountain. I don't even know.
Yeah, that was a bit hairy.
Yeah, that was insane. And what are we drinking right now, by the way?
We're drinking a Macedonian white wine.
Yeah. So this is please, yeah,
thank you.
That
much sense.
And now we know why. So where was I? I was in Zug. I was with Johann in Zug, Switzerland. And so Jess and I, you were in Macedonia. Because you were in Greece before.
Right.
And then you went up to Macedonia because you were like, which island were you on in Greece?
I was in Foligandros, Mykonos, and Lesbos.
Yeah. And you couldn't rock a good internet connection, so you decided to go back to civilization where you get a good internet connection. You ended up in Macedonia, of all places. And so, which I can't bash Macedonia. It's a beautiful country, and if my friend Gligor is listening, we love Macedonia.
We love it.
We do, actually. You actually really like Skopje, the capital city.
Yeah, it's a nice city. It's quirky. It's hot right now. It's
blazing hot.
Yeah,
blazing hot.
But I had a good time there.
And great wine. Interesting color. Most white wines don't have this sort of yellow, urine-y hue. It does. We're drinking the plastic cup. This is great. So, anyways, it was kind of a last-minute thing. I was in Switzerland, and I said, "Hey, let's get together." You were going to come to Switzerland. I said, "No, I'll come out. We meet in the Balkans," and we just somehow ended up in Sardinia. Rented a car, and we didn't really have a plan. We drove up in the mountains, and it was excruciating. And then we got there. Yeah. And it's just gorgeous. Sardinia is amazing. The weather, it's that very Mediterranean. So you get that sort of Tuscan, Umbrian sort of feel. Doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold, and so forth. But what's interesting about Sardinia, it's an island, but is it the largest or second largest island in the Mediterranean? Yeah, it's huge.
It's Sicily.
Yeah, and and you go through so many different climate zones. For one island, it's a big island, but I mean, it's an island. It's a relatively small place. You go through so many different climate zones. And as we sort of ascended going up the slope and we're winding around and the vistas were amazing and the ocean color and everything is just amazing. But everything changes very quickly.
We found the perfect temperate zone where we stayed.
Right.
The hotel was perfect. It wasn't too hot during the day, cool at night.
Right.
And then as we dropped down, it got hotter and hotter until we finally hit the seacoast.
And going back up, it was that way. We started seeing, more evergreen trees and kind of more mountainous. Yeah, but up in the hotel grounds, fruit trees and everything actually reminded me, of being in Chile, honestly. Very, it's plum trees and fig trees and, all kinds of different grapes and native olive trees and things like that. Beautiful place, but just nice, incredibly quiet, very relaxing. Highly recommend it to anybody. But
it's a good technique for coming to a place at the height of August, height of summer.
Yeah.
Don't go to the beach. Just stay in the hills.
Yeah, go do whatever everybody else is not doing. Like drinking Macedonian wine, as it were. So let's I don't want to talk about the how did you renounce and all that kind of stuff. Let's just talk about the kind of the obvious. So you're originally from the States. You got family still in the States. You kind of hit your breaking point some time ago, and you walked and you did the renunciation. You did it out of South Africa. Yeah. So that which I told you I've been to that consulate, and it like most embassies and consulates, U.S. embassies and consulates, it's like a fortress, and it's out there. It's not in Cape Town. It's not in City Bowl. You got to drive a long way, to get out there. Yeah. And I know that because I had to do it twice in a matter of 2 days because they're the guys that sewed the inserts into my passport. I have, by the way, I still have a U.S. passport. I have like the fattest U.S. passport you've ever seen because they jammed so many inserts into there.
It looks like a wallet.
It looks like George Costanza's wallet. You could barely fit it. You could barely fold it together.
You don't want to sit on it.
Yeah, you definitely
your back up.
Yeah, it really will. And it's almost full now. So it's like, I don't know, what is it, 80, 90 pages, something like that, at least, 36 times 4, whatever it is. It's huge. And I've only got four or five like pages left, which I'll probably finish by the end of the summer. But I have other passports that I can use. But you went to that consulate in South Africa. And you told me, I remember you called me the next day, freaking out because you told me, you said, oh, I want to get some information about renunciation. They gave you a really hard time about it.
Like most embassies that you go into, there's a lot of grumbling people in the embassy. They whisper, this is something. There's something wrong with this process. And I went in innocently thinking that they were going to ask me a few questions and I was going to get the paperwork. And instead, they grilled me on why I wanted to expatriate.
Yeah. And
I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't prepared to answer any questions. I just wanted to go get, the basic forms,
right.
and go home and carefully consider my answers.
It's a hard question to answer. It's a hard question to answer because
it's a trap.
Well, talking to an agent of the government is certainly a trap, but I mean, even just to give somebody a quick answer for something like that is difficult because I'm sure at the time in particular, you had years and years of sort of reasons, both rational and emotional, kind of piled up all inside of you. And to just sort of cogently and succinctly say that to somebody and go, here's why, and give them a very clear kind of cookie cutter answer for why in a way that made sense to everybody, I'm sure it was probably rather quite difficult because it was something you were still digesting for yourself at the time.
Yeah. You don't have a 25-word response for that. That's a very difficult thing to put into words. And as soon as I started, I instantly regretted having said anything because the first response I got was, this is probably tax evasion or something like that.
That's what they thought.
Tax evasion. That's what they told me. And I was so flustered at the time, I couldn't believe that somebody would just say that to me point blank without knowing my story.
Did we drink this whole bottle already?
We did.
Oh, it's only 250 milliliters. Yeah, it's a small bottle.
So one of the first things I remember thinking was, I'm not prepared to do what I just did. I really should have come in a bit more mentally prepared. And I asked her. I said, "Why are you asking me this? Am I obligated to answer?" And she said, "Yes, you are," which is actually not accurate. I mean, right. You have the right, I would think, not to answer any question, but. Be that as it may, I mumbled something about, my politics aren't aligned with the U.S. anymore. And, and she just stood there stoically and thought, what are you hiding? Probably.
Right.
Sure. It's really pointless. At the end, I had a they have a lot of South African staff. And the next person that came in to service my account said, whatever you call my expatriation file, said, don't worry. Whatever happens, you're going to get to be expatriated. It's not like it's an application. That's what it felt like. I'd given the wrong answer and they were going to deny me. And I said, well, what happens now? It's basically a fear-based model. And I think that's it really rips you off because you basically you're going to get away no matter what happens. So the point of all this is just to kind of intimidate you. That's what I felt at the time.
Let me ask you a question before I spill this all over my keyboard. Would you say when you renounced your U.S. citizenship, because for some people, there's probably somebody who's stumbled across this, maybe it's 2 years after we record this and put it online. There's somebody who just stumbled across this and for the first time ever has just heard that somebody has renounced his or her U.S. citizenship and is just and whoever you are, you're having your mind blown right now because you can't imagine why somebody would possibly do that. So let me ask you just this. Would you say in your case, was it an emotional decision or was it a rational decision?
That's a good question. It was both. It was it was rational in the sense that I knew what I was trying to achieve, financial freedom. I mean, my whole goal was just to be free, just to be able to do what I wanted to do financially. And then that becomes an emotional response because when you're blocked, when you're fighting these sort of invisible wires that, you bump into, you don't know they're there until you hit them. You do take it sort of personally after a while. There's an invisible burden to being an American as you're overseas and you're trying to do what you want to do and you run into these little barriers. And I didn't realize they were there until I expatriated. The first thing I felt was this sense of relief. And it still's with me today. I still feel that I made the right emotional decision. Rationally, traveling, that's not the easiest passport. It's not an American passport. I mean,
you have a
St. Kitts and Nevis passport.
Right.
So when I travel, I get a lot of smirks and smiles and looks. And
for people who, you travel to play. I mean, you travel a lot.
Yeah,
you and I both travel a lot,
and I get this a lot.
You go to places where somebody's never even heard of St. Kitts and said, "What is that place?"
This is the routine. They look at it, they turn it over, and they say, "Is this a country? Where is this from?" They don't even understand it. Is it part of the U.S.? Is it part of Europe? So I've learned to just calm myself down and enjoy the process. I smile, I laugh. They say the same thing every time. This is the first time I've ever seen this passport. So that's okay. I don't mind it. I enjoy.
It's a bit of a novelty, yeah.
It's a novelty, and I don't mind as long as I get through. It's fine.
So you had applied for your St. Kitts passport prior, obviously. Then you got that.
Right.
St. Kitts is one of the places where you can obtain economic citizenship, which means you go and you pay a fee. In St. Kitts, you can either buy property or contribute to the Sugar Diversification Fund. Of course, I'm sure all the money goes to the sugar diversification business in St. Kitts. Right. They have this now in Dominica. They have it in Antigua. They have it in Malta. They have it in still several places. I'm convinced, by the way, we're going to see this in Greece. We're going to see the Greek government, selling passport, citizenship. They'll bundle it together with an island or two, and yeah, sure. And then they'll charge. There'll be plenty of Russians and Chinese and so forth lining up for that sort of thing. And so these are possible. So you got one from St. Kitts. Yeah. Then you renounce. Let me back up to that again. If you had to distill it, now you've had a couple of years to kind of think through, and that a lot of that emotion and so forth is worn off. How would you explain to somebody today? Somebody said, "Why did you do it? Why did you do it, Jess?"
Basically, I and this is something that I tried to convey, in the embassy behind bulletproof glass, which is not easy. But at the time, I thought, how do you explain to somebody that you actually have moral reasons?
Right.
And it sounds weak. It sounds like you're hiding something. You're hiding behind your moral code. But I do have moral issues with what's happening in the States. I don't want to contribute to. I used to say the words "we are doing this" or "we are doing that." I was definitely associated with a lot of the stuff that was going on in the world, which I didn't agree with. And now it's taken some time. I'm still an American, in my heart. That'll never change.
But, well, we were talking about in the car. I mean, the color of your passport doesn't change who you are on the inside. It doesn't change your upbringing.
I'm still attached to what's going on in the States. I mean, I still read the news as if I'm there. But I do have one huge change, which is that I don't say "we" anymore when I use those words. I say, "Well, that's a shame."
We dropped bombs on such and so place. Yeah.
Yeah, but it doesn't change a lot for me. I'm still in agony over some of the decisions the U.S. makes, and it's still painful physically, emotionally for me. But I feel this sense of relief. So I guess looking back, I was under some duress when you live overseas and as an American, and you're being told what you can and cannot do, and you finally get rid of that. You feel a sense of freedom. You just feel this pressure relieved. And so, distilling that reason, I would say between us, I would say it's financial. 90% of it. We fought a revolution over taxation without representation.
Yeah.
Right. And you wouldn't want to say the word taxation to anybody in an embassy. That raises red flags. But that is ultimately what's going on. With FACTA. With these kind of laws coming in. Yeah, that's a huge factor. Being able to just operate an account overseas.
Right. Which is not the same as taxation, I think, in fairness. I mean, it's not about even paying taxes. It's about being chased around the world for, not committing a crime, just the simplest, most innocuous thing of just being able to open up a bank account or register a company or these sorts of things and being, treated like a second-class citizen everywhere you go. It's amazing. I mean, I see this myself, bankers who just get so frustrated and just loathing the government of the United States for what they have to put up with now. and changing their entire business model and so forth because of some regulation. The analogy I always make, what I tell people, I said, let me explain to you what FATCA is all about. It is as if the government of Saudi Arabia passed a law stating that U.S. grocery store chains could no longer sell pork to Muslims on U.S. soil. And people in the U.S. would go nuts. They would go nuts. They'd be out there saying, oh, who the hell do these people think they are? You know? And like, that's basically what the U.S. government did. You know, and it's insane, the arrogance of being able to, you know, going and telling a Bangladeshi bank to say, you have to get in bed with us and report all of your customers. Say, what the hell are these people? And that's exactly what happened. It's insane. And so to say that you don't want to be part of that reporting apparatus, you know, that bureaucracy and so forth is different than, you know, saying, well, I just don't like taxes and so forth. Because, you know, and you're a smart guy. I mean, you know, Jess is a guy, you know, I put you on stage in Chile. I mean, you know this stuff inside out. You spent years researching all these things, just as I have. You know, you've gone all around the world. You've met with a lot of the people that I've met with. You've lived in places all over the world. I mean, you know, there are, you know, for people that really want to if you really want to reduce your taxes, there are a lot of ways to do it. And we've talked about these things. You know, you can set up a company in Puerto Rico and have 4%, you know, corporate tax rate and get, so long as that program exists now that it's completely bankrupt. You know, you can get free capital gains in Puerto Rico. You can get the offshore foreign earned income exclusion. You can set up your own. You can set up your own captive insurance company. There's so many different options for you to reduce legitimately using exactly everything that's in the U.S. tax code. You can reduce your U.S. tax bill substantially. You know, but there's another layer that goes way beyond that in renouncing your citizenship, where now all of a sudden you cut all ties to an apparatus that really treats you like, you're born into some kind of bondage, that you're born with this obligation that chases you around everywhere you go that you never signed up for.
I'll give you an example. It's like when I was in Greece and we knew that there was going to be a cash crunch. This was about a month ago. I recommended to an American to go take out money out of the ATM before, you know, I knew that they were taking maybe $1 billion out of the bank on Friday. And on Monday, it wasn't guaranteed the bank was going to open, which in fact, it was the following week when it was closed. In any case, when we went to the ATM, I used a Georgian bank. You know, I used TBC, which is a great bank. Right. And I have no problems withdrawing money in all these different countries that I travel. So as soon as I arrive in a country, I can go to the ATM, I can take out money. I can go to a new country the same day and take out money. Right. I don't trigger anything. Right. My friend, who's an American, immediately had an issue. Her card didn't work. And it's because of the fraud detection system in the States. And when you call back, they say, which country are you in? And how long are you going to be there? And they begin to ask you these questions. The feeling is...
But Jess, it's for your protection.
It's for your protection.
It's for your protection.
Exactly.
It's for your security.
It's subtle. It's not your money. You have to ask them to explain yourself and
why you want your own money.
And the worst thing is they'll say, well, how long are you going to be traveling for? You know, and you'll say, well, you know, you don't really want to say this. This is the wrong thing to say, is I'm not really traveling. I live overseas. Because they basically will say, well, only can give you an open, you know, carte blanche to get your money for 90 days.
Right.
And then after that, you have to call us and kind of open your account again.
Right.
You know, so these are things that you don't see as an American, because if you don't leave the States, you'll never bump into these little rules.
Right. And it's why people go overseas. You know, they have to call the credit card company and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm going to London for, you know, and from this date to this date and so forth." And you know, we were talking about this. You know, when you call your bank, and if you call Georgia and say, "Oh, I'm going overseas," and they'll say, "What are you telling us?
Why are you calling?
Who cares? Why are you telling me this?"
but you could hear this and you could say, well, so what? So you make a phone call and you got 3 months. That's no big deal. You know, free. You don't have to explain yourself. But it changes your mental apparatus to can I rather than I can. And I think that's the big difference. And I think Americans tend to subtly, without knowing it, unconsciously begin to have a can I. They begin to explain their actions to their bank. They begin to say, well, I'm here and then I'm going there. And it's none of the bank's business where they're going or what their travel plans are. You know, and just the idea of flipping it on its head and having you explain yourself in order to get access to your money, to me is very nefarious. It begins to train you to begin to ask permission for access.
We were talking about that with respect to like airport security and how you can always tell if you're traveling overseas, you can always tell the people who live in the States, because when they're standing in the airport security lines, they're the ones who are already taking off all of their clothes. You know, before they get right, they got the shoes off, the belt, you know, the pants are starting to sag, they have the jacket off, the laptop's out, you know, everything is kind of all ready to go, and people look at it and go like, "What do you?
You don't need to do anything.
Like, what is this guy doing? Yeah. Why are you putting? Chili, why are you taking your clothes off for?" Yeah, and so, but it's just because people who live in the States have become so trained that like that's what you have to do. You must, you have to take off all your stuff, and then you go and and you get into the body scanner and you raise your hands into the I surrender pose, while some guy who got his job, from the back of a pizza box, decides in his sole discretion whether or not you're a threat to national security and so forth. And that's the thing. And it's a very, it's a way of, in the land of the free, they've done an amazing job essentially, sucking the soul of freedom out of the entire culture and turning it into something that makes people incredibly subordinate and compliant and, being very differential to authority. And the cops come over now and they're all, black clad with the automatic assault weapons and so forth.
And there's websites dedicated to how you submit to the police, how you put your hands on the steering wheel and how you behave not to, put yourself in harm's way.
Right.
Which is really a huge change from the early 90s even, when police were very polite and they would approach you and, ask you how you were. And things have really changed. It's subtle how this is changing how people view their own access to their own money or their freedom. It's psychological more than physical access.
So now it's been a couple of years since you've done this. Are you happier?
Yes.
Do you feel? Would you say you're more successful as a result?
Yes.
Do you have any regrets financially?
I have no regrets financially whatsoever.
Do you have any non-financial regrets?
Yeah, I do. From what I gathered, I could go back to the States fairly easily. I could get a visa, and that didn't turn out to be true. That's turned out to be. It's not really my issue, to be honest. I miss Colorado, where I'm from. I miss the mountains. I miss the sport, but really, it's being separated from family, and that is an issue. So what happened was basically, I went back to the same embassy in South Africa where I'd received pretty aggressive treatment, and I'd been accused of tax evasion, right off the cuff, which is not true at all. But what are you going to do? It's argue somebody through bulletproof glass, your tax case, so you just stand there and take it. Having said that, when I went back, they knew me and they knew my case, and they looked at my file and they were sort of like kind of smirking, going, "Well, you're back. It's been a couple of months, and you want to go back to the States." My feeling is they've covered themselves legally they denied me. They said you didn't have enough. Yeah, they treat you like everybody else. So what they say is you haven't proven enough roots in your third party country to justify going back to the U.S.
Right.
How do we know you're not going to take a job away from a hardworking American? And I just thought, you've got to be kidding me. Well, because I had a passport for 38 years.
The guy that just renounced his citizenship wants to go back and steal a job from an American.
Right. Right. So you're going to treat me like everybody else. Okay, which is actually not a nice way to treat anybody. But having said that, so I was denied. And once you get denied, that goes on your record. And so, every time you go in, it becomes another black mark.
Right.
So it's something you want to be very cautious about and careful with.
I told you though, I have a friend. The same thing happened to him. He renounced his citizenship. A fellow St. Kittsian who was denied his visa. So he renounced and then was denied a visa. And that's the thing. When you're denied a visa to the U.S. and they say you're not allowed to apply for a visa unless your circumstances materially change. Well, he went back like within a week and said, "Yep, my circumstances materially changed," and he was approved the next time because he, basically buried them in documentation. And you're right. They treat you when you're a renunciate. They treat you like anybody else. They treat you as they would treat a Bangladeshi or a Guatemalan or somebody applying for a visa to the U.S. Their job is to make sure that you're going to go, that you're going to spend your money, you're going to leave after 60, 90 days, whatever, and that's it. And you're going to go back to your home, and that's all you're going to do. What they have to prevent is they have to do the risk assessment to make sure that you're not going to go and steal a job, that you're not going to stay over and overstay your visa, and you're not going to be another illegal immigrant. Now, obviously, common sense dictates that a person that just renounced his or her citizenship is not a risk of overstaying a visa in the United States of America.
Why would you give up your passport and go back and then overstay your visa?
Right. But they don't. But they have to check their common sense, and they have to treat you like everybody else. And so they just go through this and say, okay. And what are the things they look at? They want to see, okay, do you actually, live there? Do you have a life? Do you have a lifestyle? Do you have a home? Do you have a job? Do you have a family? Do you have a dog? Do you have a whatever? All these things that kind of go into the case, or are you kind of footloose and fancy free and going to go and you're just, in your case, your guy had a boatload of stamps in his new passport, and you were kind of sort of in South Africa, but not really. And said, I don't know about this guy. He doesn't have roots anywhere, and that's risky for them because they think, okay, anybody who doesn't have roots is a risk of staying over in the U.S. And I even had some of the guys on, even on Team Sovereign Man, young guys who go to the U.S. And have had problems, because they say, okay, well, you're a young person, you've got a lot of stamps in your passport, and they just think, they think that's suspicious. Somebody who gets paid to wear a gun on his hip and scrutinize people and intimidate them. Those are the sorts of things that they look at. So that's, but so anyways, for my other friend, he ended up getting sorted out. So he went back with all the documentation, said, here's where I live, here's my country club membership, my house, all these things that show that I'm grounded and rooted in this place. And so I just want to go back and see some family, and then I'll come back here to my new home. And then they approved him, actually. So it was okay.
There's a little section. It's like a little VIP section in the consulate in Cape Town, and it's about 10 chairs, and it's reserved for Americans, and it's right near all the windows. So while I was waiting for my appointment to start, I was sitting in the front, and I could listen to all the conversations from all the people that were applying for U.S. visas from South Africa. It was interesting. They had basically two criteria for people that made people's applications successful that they needed to have, and that was that they had property that they owned. I was listening to these conversations. Do you own? Do you rent? Yes, I own. Great. Do you have a relationship? Are you married? Do you have a girlfriend? Oh, you have a girlfriend. How many years? 10 years? 15 years? Oh, is she here? Can she come up? Oh, yes, I know this guy. Whatever. Who knows who this woman is? And they would get approved. And then I heard a lot of people get denied. They would say oh, well, I rent and, I've just got a girlfriend. How long do you know them? 6 months. Sorry. So those two criterion seem to be the definitive two criterion. Do you own property, and do you have a long-term relationship? They just want to make sure you're coming back. So I didn't have either one, and they pretty much shot me down.
What would you say to somebody who comes to you and says, man, I've really been thinking about it for a long time. It'd be nice to not have to pay taxes. It'd be nice to not have to deal with all the the overseas compliance and all the forms. The United States is one of the only countries in the world that throws senior citizens in prison for not filing forms. Regardless of we're not even talking about people that owe back taxes. And the fact that, the United States is one of the only countries in the world that criminalize, tax matters are actually criminal matters. That's just nuts. In other places, in civilized countries, they treat it as a civil matter. But in the United States, it's a criminal matter. But even if you don't owe any taxes, they're not even saying that you owe taxes. They're saying, oh, you didn't file this form, we're going to throw you in jail. That's just obscene to me. Yeah. But even all that aside, and somebody says, I feel that it's fundamentally different. I don't like the direction of the country. I have serious misgivings about these debt levels that just keep accumulating that I never signed up for. Constant warfare. All these things that I have, let's say, philosophical misgivings about. In addition to, yeah, sure, I can see the financial benefit. I can see how much it would benefit me financially, moving abroad, not having to worry about these things, becoming more financially free. What would your sort of advice and wisdom be, having done this and so many years into it?
Well, if you're coming from a position where you feel very strongly, then that's your moral proclivity. Then I would say go with your heart on that. If you're looking at it practically, and this is a conversation I have with my parents. I mean, my parents are both American, and from time to time, my mom says to me, "Oh, I think we need to get another passport. We need to get away from the States." And I say, "Why?" I ask her why. What's your goal? Mm-hmm. If your goal is to get outside the States, what you need is residency. Residency is a whole different animal. Right. And residency really pretty much solves most people's issues. What they want is a place to live.
Right.
They want a place that they can travel to and from. Obviously this is a small issue for people that don't travel a lot. But if you travel as much as you and I travel, it's a big deal. When you go to a country, they ask you, well, where's your country of residency? Mm. Do you have a return ticket there? So my country of residency is South Africa. When I'm traveling to Peru, for instance, I have to have a connection to Europe and back to South Africa, and that's expensive to maintain. That ticket, if it's in July and then I come up against July, I need to move it to September, October. I move these tickets all around. It's a very inefficient way of traveling. So you always have to show your return to your country of residency. So residency is great because residency allows you to exist, allows you to, you usually become tax resident, etc.
It ensures that you always have a place to go.
Outside the U.S.
The legal right to reside and travel to and so forth. And it makes a lot of sense. And I think, one of the things that we talk about a lot makes sense for people that are looking to have a great plan B. You want to have legal residency, I think, at a minimum in another country because you want to figure that out in advance.
What I'm saying, it's imperative.
Yeah,
Before you expatriate, that you should have an idea of where you're going to be a resident. If you don't have it, you should go get it.
I think even regardless of whether or not people even are thinking about expatriating, I just think it makes sense for somebody to have a plan B and go, if I really had to leave in a hurry, where would I go? You kind of want to have that figured out before you start packing your bags.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like if the proverbial metaphor hits the fan and all of a sudden you go, I got to get out of here. You don't while you're folding your underwear and throwing it in the suitcase, you don't go, gee, honey, where do you think we should go? We should buy a ticket somewhere. I don't know. You kind of want to have that sorted out. You want a place that you already have the legal right to live and maybe even work and whatever so forth. Maybe have a small property, whatever it is that you have, but actually have a place that you have sorted out. And there are a lot of places in the world where you can obtain legal residency very easily.
If you don't mind filing FACTA and you don't mind reporting those accounts, you can have quite a lot of your income, tax-free, up to, I think, 75. Sure.
No, it's for tax year 2015, it was over $100,000.
Over $100,000.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, for most people, it's really not an issue as far as taxes go. But in terms of if your issue is just to sort of moralistically is, we've talked about leave the U.S. behind, leave that burden behind, not have to deal with those regulations, those regulatory issues. I would say do it. Make the step. It's a good step, but practically there are issues that you should look at, and most of them, I would say, almost 90% are solved by having a great country of residence, and obviously a second passport. That's mandatory.
What would you say? Certainly for expatriation, yeah. I think I think residency is critical for anybody. I think a second passport is a fantastic insurance option because it's like residency plus. I mean, it's a huge legal protection for you to ensure that you have a place to live and work and invest and so forth. It can't be taken away. Residency can be taken away and so forth, but having another passport is really a fantastic insurance option. What would you say to somebody who criticizes you? What would you say to? There's got to be people who are listening to this who are going to say, I wish I could just meet this guy. I'll punch him in the face. Who does he think he is? People would kill to be an American, and he just gave it up. What would you say to somebody like that? He just walked away from the freest country in the world. That sort of thing. I mean, what would you say to somebody like that?
Well, I would say that the absolute fundamental American, probably the highest goal of any American is freedom. And freedom, anytime you infringe on somebody else's freedom, it's I would say anti-American, to be honest. And I think maybe these are a little bit old school, morals. I don't think that many people really believe in that with the statist views that the U.S. government has adopted lately, where the nanny state, you should have to always make every decision with the greater good in mind. But when my grandfather was fighting the Japanese, he believed that that the highest moral good in America was freedom, that everybody should be able to do what they wanted. And the less intervention that you have, that was the moral good. That was the highest value that you could have as an American. So I would tell those people, if you're truly an American and you truly believe that America stands for freedom, then you should allow everybody to pursue their own personal freedom. It doesn't affect you in any way what I've done. Basically it's all in your head. If you have a problem with that, that's fine. But again, I think we always stood as a nation of tolerance. That was the guiding principle of our founding fathers. And I hope that's respected.
I think it's a great answer. If I were in your position, I'd have an entirely different answer. It might be a little bit more aggressive. I think. I think I'm a pretty balanced guy. I mean, obviously, I attended the academy, served time in the military. I think that the United States is a great country. Unfortunately, it has a horrendous government that has deeply indebted unborn generations who won't see the light of day for decades, and they'll be born into a form of slavery that will follow them around through their entire lives. So the slavery of debt is something that cannot be understated by any stretch of the imagination. I think that people who believe now that the United States is the freest country in the world and so forth have probably either A, never thought seriously about what that means, and B, never traveled outside of the United States. If you're in the U.S. is one of the most heavily regulated places in the world. If you're in the United States and you're listening to this, at this exact moment, you are guilty of violating any number of crimes that you've never heard of. The Code of Federal Regulations is so long it would fill entire football stadiums, before you really got past the first couple of chapters. The tax code, all these things, exist now. There were 4 crimes outlined in the Constitution, and now, you can be guilty of so many things that aren't even actually on the books. People think. I mean, you and I remember the days of Schoolhouse Rock. I'm just a bill. You remember those days? Yeah. And so, that's how we grow up thinking that that's how it works, right? That's how there's a law and there's a rule of law and there's a process and so forth. And that's not how it works at all. You go to this website, go to federalregister.gov. I would encourage you to do this. In fact, I'm just going to do it right now, just for kicks. And so this federalregister.gov is the website that the federal government basically publishes all of the new rules and regulations and executive action and so forth. So just today, it's 221 pages. We sit here and look at this tonight, and by the time you see this, it's going to be any number of things. But I mean, this at any given time, when they add all this stuff up, it's it actually goes up with every president. It started to actually decline under Reagan, and then it just exploded. Bush, Clinton, W, and under Obama now it's closing in on 80,000 pages a year. And so these aren't laws. These are rules, and yet they carry the same weight and effect as laws. And so they say one of the most obscene ones was one that I wrote about. I don't know, maybe about a month and a half ago, something like that. And this was about I think it was the Bureau of Economic Analysis had a form. This was a survey the Bureau of Economic Analysis came out with. And they wanted you to fill out this survey. And they said, okay, anybody, if you have some kind of foreign, if you have a foreign company, whatever. Basically, the Bureau of Economic Analysis wanted some information on big companies, Apple, and what they're doing with their foreign subsidiaries and so forth. But when they crafted the rule, they didn't really think it through. So what they just said is if you have a foreign company of any kind, then you have to fill out this survey. And if you don't, then there's this huge list of penalties, including from anywhere from $2,500 up to $25,000 if you don't fill out a survey. And They reserve the right to go to a judge and have a judge file an injunction and force you to fill out this form and all stuff. So they're willing to clog up, the justice system in the land of the free to get somebody to fill out a survey. After charging somebody a productive citizen $25,000 because some bureaucrat wants them to fill out a survey. I'm not making this up. This is all there. And this was something that they published in this very document in the Federal Register. It came out in late 2014. They just kind of snuck it in one of the couple of hundred pages. There's a little passage, a couple paragraphs said, yep, we're going to have this, and here's the penalties, and so on and so forth. And they passed it, and it's going to be effective June 30th, 2015. And then all of a sudden, June 30th, 2015, and for very few people have heard of this. Well, we caught wind of it, and we started telling everybody, said, hey, you got to do this. We sent it to our premium subscribers and so forth. But I remember there was this person's name, and I won't say who, but there was this person's name, because every one of these rules that comes out, they say like the person's name in the Department of Government. And there's this person, the Bureau of Economic Analysis, and her name was listed there. And I called her every day for like a month as soon as I found out, trying to find this lady to say, who the hell do you think you are? Right. Shame on you. Right. Shame on you. Mm-hmm. Seriously. And this is, I mean, a lot of people know, I mean, I just read so much history in it, and it's the history of the Ottoman Empire, once the greatest empire in the world, and collapsed under its own weight. And the turning point, that chaotic inflection point, the bifurcation point in chaos theory, in which a system goes from linear to nonlinear, in which they really lose all control, was the time at which suddenly now the government became no longer a system in which the government existed to support the people, but the bureaucrats believed that the people existed to support their position. Mm-hmm. And that is clearly what's happened in the United States, where at any given time, anybody who's in the United States and the land of the free is guilty of committing any number of things, any violation of rules, not even laws, not anything in the Constitution, but just rules, where there's dozens upon dozens of agencies at the state, local, and federal level who can run away and abscond with all of your wealth, everything that you worked for your entire life, freeze you out of your account, seize your property, all kinds of things without any due process whatsoever, where you're guilty until proven innocent. All the things that we grew up watching Schoolhouse Rock and learning in our government civics class is all bullshit. Mm-hmm. It's all bullshit. It's dead. And so people who think that that's still the case, it's kind of cute, but it's naive.
It's just ignorant.
It really is. It's naive. And it really is. It's a beautiful country. Some of them wonderful people, incredibly nice, generous, culture and so forth. But just a horrendous government. The president of the United States was in Africa today, telling, African leaders about, you shouldn't be so corrupt and, all these sorts of things. And I mean, the U.S. government is so corrupt. I mean, they could be giving clinics to the rest of the world on corruption. The difference is that the American government is corrupt in an incredibly sophisticated way. And so they get rewarded instead of, put the money, directly in my pocket, if they're much more sophisticated about it. They get stock tips and board seats and I'm an expert land speculator. Right. And my wife, in her endowment got this huge endowment from the charity division of some Fortune 500 company and all these things. And I get to fly around on the private jet to go on the, they're just so much more sophisticated. And of course, and then when they leave office, they get, $1 million speaking gigs, I get to go say a few words to some bank and get paid $2 million, for a 45-minute speech. I mean, it's corruption. It's incredibly corrupt. And that's what you're saying. It's like kind of everywhere you look, there's sort of corruption. Every major institution. I mean, you can't even kids playing soccer. I mean, the entire, FIFA and so forth. It's just full of corruption. Everywhere you look, it's just kind of corruption everywhere. And all these institutions, the United States government is so easy at wagging the finger at everybody else and saying, you people, you corrupt people, we're going to go and, and chase you down and make sure, we're the world's police and make sure that nobody else is going to be, corrupt and so forth. And it's this horrible, hypocrisy. And I think that a lot of people, yes, are naive and perhaps even willfully ignorant in some cases, because it's much easier to believe that, we're number one and, we have the best country and so forth, and ignore all the obvious data. that, well, okay, yeah, America is number one, is the number one debt burden in the world, is the number one incarceration rate in the world. Oh, we can look at all these things and say, yeah, great, congratulations. And it's a wonderful country with great people, and it's beautiful. And, I enjoy it. I visit my friends. I got a lot of friends in LA, and Colorado is a great place. I go to Texas. My parents are there, and it's wonderful, and I enjoy it. But it feels so different than it used to be. And it's the analogy that I always make. I've got a little niece, when I saw her when she was born, and I saw her, a year later, and for me as the uncle, I go, oh my God, you've gotten so much bigger. And it's those the aggregate of all the little day-to-day changes, all of a sudden, all at once, I sense it so acutely. As opposed to my sister, who's there every single day, doesn't necessarily notice the tiny little day-to-day changes in her daughter. But I notice it all so acutely, all at one time. It goes, and it just knocks me in the face because I'm not there every single day. And so I notice it when I'm there. The cultural changes and all these things. And I could go on for that. I was actually explaining this to a friend of mine, about it. And it's great. I don't have any. Like I said, I think it's a great place. I think there are a lot of great places in the world. The United States is certainly a great place. Has a lot of challenges. The financial challenges, the fiscal challenges, the tax challenges, the debt challenges. And I was having this conversation with. No, I've been telling you this. I don't think. I was in London when I flew back from Bangkok about a week and a half ago, whatever. I was in London very briefly at a hot date on Saturday night with Tim Price. And so Tim and I, Tim's the editor of Price Value International. He's one of the smartest guys in finance you could ever hope to meet. Hilariously witty guy, that dry English wit. Tim's a great guy. And so we sat down. He was telling me this story. He said, Tim's probably, I don't know, he's early, mid-40s, something like that. And so he was saying, when I graduated from university, I actually had options in the job market. I could go out and get a good job. I was able to graduate from university without being in debt up to my eyeballs and beyond. Housing was affordable. I could actually go out and obtain a mortgage and buy a home and start working on building equity and all those sorts of things. And I could do that now. And he said, I look at, where young people are at right now, particularly in the West, in the UK, in the US, and so forth. You graduate, your job prospects are, who knows, where that's going to be. You graduate with $50,000, $60,000 in debt that you have to spend the next 15 years of your life paying off. Home prices are astronomical, and good luck, you got to go and come up with, with $150,000 to put down on a house and all these sorts of things. I mean, it's just, I couldn't imagine what it's like, particularly for young people. And particularly in these places, and to know that you're going to spend your entire life paying into a pension system, into a social security system that's not going to be there for you. Only complete idiots thinks that, social security, if you're in your 30s or early 40s, I mean, you have to be insane to believe that, your pension system is going to be there for you. And so, you look at this and you think, okay, that's great. You love your country, you love your government and so forth. But at the end of the day, it's a very dangerous thing to love something that very clearly is not going to love you back. I think you did something that you felt was very good and rational and appropriate for you and your family in a way that you felt like you could have. And you guys don't know Jess, but I mean, he's one of the most kindest, generous, worldly guys out there. No, you are, though, man. I mean, you care very deeply about other people. And I think it's so easy for people to point the finger because they conflate, they think that everybody else is obligated to paying into the system, that we all somehow have this obligation to collectively suffer together. And if somebody breaks away from that and says, you know what, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to play that game. I'm going to take my own finances, my own wealth, my own success, and I'm going to do what I think is right with it and help the things that I want to help and improve things that I want to improve. Suddenly nobody wants to hear from you anymore. You're a traitor, you're a coward, and so forth. And I've talked about this myself. I mean, I make copious use of the foreign earned income exclusion, which saves me probably what, 50,000. I mean, between the foreign housing exclusion, the foreign earned income exclusion, and so forth. I mean, you talk about being able to pull in $150,000 with minimal tax, which saves $50,000, $60,000 in the course of a year. And I was able to take that money and and buy. I mean, I don't really need to talk a whole lot about this, but I mean, I bought a leg for a guy that got his leg blown off in Afghanistan. And I wouldn't have been able to do that had I not saved 60 grand, in taxes and so forth. And I'd say I'm on the side of life, not on the side of destruction, because I know every one of my tax dollars is going to support war and drones and dropping bombs by remote control and body scanners and debt, and that's where the money goes. Right. And to fly the President of the United States around to go and give speeches and so forth that are just full of shit. And now I can choose to invest my money in where I think it goes the best and where it makes the most difference.
It's grotesque when you watch the news and you feel, if you feel like we do, that there's this sense that there's something happening that's beyond you, beyond your control. I used to feel really emasculated by it. We would complain about these things, and then you would ask yourself, what am I going to do about it? Am I going to complain? Am I going to go to Washington? And the only thing that I can control is myself. It's like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What are you going to do? Go bang your heads together and say, get along? So leave that alone. That's something you're not going to solve in your life. You're not going to solve it. Right. Maybe somebody else will. And as well, I realized that I wasn't going to go figure out any of this corruption stuff. I wasn't going to actually do anything. My vote doesn't count in Washington.
There's no grassroots campaign that you're going to start that's really going to,
I actually thought about going to Zuccotti Park and actually protesting. And, my mom just looked at me and said, are you nuts? You're just going to get bonked on the head by a cop. You're going to get tased. You're going to end up in prison. You're going to end up wherever, hurt. Maybe your back is broken by some cop kneeling on your neck, etc. Whatever. But, is that going to change anything? No. And we can see that is true. It didn't change a damn thing. So all I can affect is me. And the only thing I can do is to feel good. It's about driving out of your house. We talk about this, and driving on the road. And when a cop goes by you, you don't feel like you just got cased. This guy is not a shark. He's not looking at you like, right. What's wrong with this guy? Is there something I can pull him over for? Just a cop looking at you, driving down his road. He's got something else to do, And you feel that sense of like, this is a guy just doing his job. He's looking for crimes. He's not looking for non-crime, or, thought crimes and potential crimes. What can I bust this guy for? Pulling people over and saying, are you an American citizen? Yes or no? That's just a waste of everybody's time. Mm-hmm. That's just a training program. So essentially it's about me feeling better. It's about me feeling, and when I'm feeling better, then I'm more productive. I'm more creative. I'm happier. I can do more in my life. When I'm feeling frustrated, and that was really the biggest thing, was I was so frustrated with everything that was going on in the States, and I realized there's something I can do about this.
Right.
I can do one thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean,
bitch about it, stop bitching about it, or get an action about it.
Right. No, I agree with you entirely. I mean, the only thing you can really control is yourself.
Yeah.
You can't make your neighbor see the light. You can't all of a sudden go out and convince hundreds of millions of people that the system is deeply flawed and there's a lot of risk and this is just not a kind of system that turns out well. That all of a sudden when people realize that they can vote themselves more bread and more circuses, that's generally not the high point in a society and culture. And you can't go out and change that. And these sort of ideas to say, oh, we'll go campaign and we'll get the vote out and we'll try and educate everybody else and so forth. Those are incredibly noble ideals and ways to spend your time, but we all have a finite amount of resources. We all have a finite amount of time and energy and money and so forth. And where are you going to invest that? Are you going to try and invest it trying to convince your neighbor that that all these things that he or she might believe is wrong, and that there's another way that's better and that doesn't depend on deceit and corruption and destruction and intimidation and violence and so forth. And some people just, to me, I learned a long time ago that you can't teach people that. People have to realize that for themselves, that everybody at some point or another has that aha moment. And maybe it's, maybe it's some father, seeing his kids, molested by some government agent, in an airport somewhere, or maybe it's some unlucky entrepreneur who didn't file a form that just had his entire life savings frozen, or maybe it's some guy whose neighbor's, dumbass kid fell into a swimming pool and now he's being sued for, everything that he's ever worked to achieve over his entire life, or maybe that is so many different cases, and all of a sudden somebody goes, I never thought this would happen to me. Or they see it happen to a friend or to a neighbor, and all of a sudden that's the thing, that's the spark that makes them think that maybe everything that I've been brought up to believe isn't actually right. Maybe everything that I hear on CNN or from financial media about how great this, that, and the other is, maybe that's not actually the full story. And I think that at some point or another, people kind of come to that. You came to yours, and you took action you felt like was the most appropriate action for you.
But out of every shadow comes a gift. And so I think as people realize that, as they realize the government doesn't have their best interests at heart, they become more independent, they become smarter, they become more resourceful. And I think that's a gift. I think that's a good thing, because basically if you're just following everything you've been told, eventually you're going to come up against the hard truth, which the government doesn't give a shit about you. They don't care about you. And if you think that you are an American and you're identifying with that, that's great. But we're essentially, from a spiritual standpoint, we're universal, immortal beings. And to align yourself and say that I am anything is just a label. Ultimately, you can just say, I am. And you can choose to be anything you want. And that's the beauty of life. You can be anything you choose to be. If you define yourself as an American, that's fine, but it has limits. I think our philosophy is we just have decided not to define ourselves in that narrow of a box.
Well, and certainly I don't think anybody should be defined by the color of their passport any more than the color of their skin.
Yeah.
And it's certainly my hope that at some point in the future, people will look upon passports and national citizenships and things like that as curious artifacts of a long lost past. But for now, man, I'm very happy for you. I know you're happy. You're doing great in life, and it was awesome to spend the last couple of days with you, dude. So thanks for having a great time, and thanks for the Macedonian wine and the good talk. Hope you guys enjoyed it from Jess, and it was good talking to you. We'll go ahead and sign off, and talk to you again soon.
Good night.